with us, we have Summa Silver Corp. Summa Silver is an explorer focusing on developing the Hughes property in the prolific Tonopah district of Nevada. The property features both a significant past-producing mine called the Belmont Mine and a possible 5-kilometer exploration extension of the Tonopah mining district. No significant modern exploration has been completed around the Belmont Mine, and very little has been completed on the remainder of the property. Summa Silver is led by an award-winning team specializing in a modern approach to mineral discovery through systematic and cutting-edge exploration methods. Here to give us more and give us an update is the CEO, Galen McNamara. Welcome, Galen, and please start your presentation when you're ready, and we'll take questions from our viewers after. Thanks so much.
Okay, sounds good, and thanks very much, Paul and Sophie. So I'll just start by sharing my screen here. Okay, so Summa Silver, almost brand new silver and gold exploration and development company focused in the southwestern US and principally Nevada around the historic Tonopah district. Two properties to get started. The first one is in Tonopah, Nevada. The second one is in southwestern New Mexico. And we're really focusing on high-grade precious metals districts. I think there's so many examples out there where a company can go in and look at an older district that hasn't really seen too much exploration and find that there's a lot of juice left to squeeze. Really focusing on those high grades and trying to be early movers in these places, because if you share the opinion that I have that we're in the early innings of a precious metals bull market, well, then now is the time to be aggressive. And then lastly here, it's also all about what jurisdiction you're in. So we really want to focus in on those strong jurisdictions, especially ones that are high ranked for investment by the Fraser Institute, like Nevada. So I just like to start these things out by introducing myself a little bit. My name is Galen McNamara. I'm a geologist by trade, going back about 15 years. Before putting Summa together, I really spent about 2 years looking for a project that I could really sink my teeth into. Something that I could spend a few years of my life possibly building into something good for, both shareholders and myself, and came to this one. Before I was doing that, I was managing all of the drilling for a company called NextGen Energy in northern Saskatchewan, and we made a very large uranium discovery, and that was going back to about 2014. And then before I was doing that, I was working around the CB mine, also in Saskatchewan, and we discovered a gold deposit that's now in production called the Santoy Gap deposit. So really none of that's to pat myself on the back as a geologist, but I think what 2 wins give you, especially as a geologist, it really gives you a sense of what works and what doesn't. So my whole approach here is to look for that tier 1 discovery and to steal the phrase, go big or go home. Very quickly, the capital structure of the company. 51 million shares outstanding, 59 million fully diluted. We've got about $9 million in the bank right now, and a recent share price of 122. Although today it's up in the 130s, I believe, when I last checked, which was nice to see. We've done 2 capital raises since putting this thing together in May. The first one was $5 million at 25 cents, and the second one was $8 million at $1, with a half warrant at $1.75. And I'm happy to say that Eric Sprott participated in both. $5 million at the $1 round and $1 million at the 25-cent round. So he actually owns 18% of the company currently. Okay, the first property called the Hughes Property in Nevada. Now, we all know Nevada as a world-class gold producing jurisdiction. If it were a country, it would be the 4th largest gold producer in the world, or something like that. But what a lot of people don't know is that Nevada was originally known as the Silver State. And if you're driving into Nevada, it still says, "Welcome to Nevada, the Silver State," on the road signs. And that was because of 2 Wild West classic American mining camps. The first one was the Comstock Lode, and that's up near Reno, Nevada. And the second one is the Tonopah District, and that's where our property is, called the Hughes Property. We have the eastern half of the Tonopah District. And that's halfway between Reno and Las Vegas on the highway. So just a quick history of the area. It was discovered in 1900. supposedly by a guy who was chasing after his runaway donkeys as he moved from one ranch to the next ranch through the desert. Now that's a story. I don't know if it's the story, but that's a story, and it's pretty interesting. But anyways, at the end of the day, the entire district produced 175 million ounces of silver and almost 2 million ounces of gold at grades of about 1,260 grams per ton silver equivalent. So a very large, high-grade past producer that's never seen any modern exploration, more or less, until now. Finally, the last little interesting thing about the history of this project is that it was formerly owned by Howard Hughes. So just as a tip of the hat to the history of it, we named it the Hughes Property. So it's the eastern side of the Tonopah district. So this was really one of America's great silver producers in the 1910s and 1920s. The main past producing asset on the property is called the Belmont Mine. Now, numbers for the past production, the totals are more or less incomplete, but we can generally say that there was 35 to 40 million ounces of silver produced and around 400,000 ounces of gold produced at grades of around 1,250 grams per ton silver equivalent. So again, big high grade past production, coming from about dozens of epithermal high grade veins, the largest one being 15 meters wide. And again, no modern exploration. I don't even have any records of this mine area ever being drilled, which I thought was very interesting when I looked at this thing. Originally started looking at it back last fall. And I think, like I was saying before, there's just many examples of companies going into these past producing districts, that haven't been looked at in decades or more, applying a modern exploration approach, shooting some modern weapons and having some success. Having a lot of success. So this is just a map of the property. The town of Tonopah itself is near the bottom left. You can see it there. The highways that go to Reno and Las Vegas run right through the town. And we're around the town and to the east of the town. Now the next slide I'm just going to zoom into here is the Belmont Mine itself. So it'll just be in this area that I'm circling. Okay, the Belmont Mine. A lot of information here, some good information on the left side of this slide, but what I like to concentrate on this slide is the map. So the Belmont Mine didn't shut down because it ran out of ore. It shut down for two reasons. Number one, at the end of the 1920s, silver and gold prices collapsed. Number two, the veins, which are those red structures, those red lines, ran into a fault zone called the Halifax Fault. And that's that white dashed line that runs up and down the middle of the map. So the veins ran into that fault, and the old-time miners more or less lost them on the other side of that fault, except for a few very interesting sniffs. So there's really two questions left for me here. Number one, how much is left to find in and around the mine on extensions of those veins? Number two, how much is left to find on the far side of that fault where there hasn't really been much exploration, but where there's been some really interesting smoke that I'm going to tell you about here just in the next slide. Okay, so where we're at now. At the beginning of July, we started a 7,500 meter drill program, which is still in progress and still going and is likely to be upsized. Waiting on all the assays, but I expect them very, very soon to imminently. So the summary of the program, starting at the Belmont Mine here on the left, and this is an underground looking view. 7 holes have been drilled in there. All have intersected, things that we want to see. Good hydrothermal alteration, which is basically geology code for smoke. We've seen really excellent looking veins, breccias, stockworks, everything we want to see in short. So 7 holes in there, and those are really just following up on what we think are unmined extensions of those old veins, of those old high-grade veins. So that's number one. Number two, the Mizpah extension fault, target 2. And believe it or not, that's actually on the far side of that fault I was telling you about on the last slide, which runs more or less through here. So in this area, in the Mizpah extension mine, some really small scale mining on one level that is reported to have intersected some really, really high grades. And the interesting thing there is that it was definitely never drilled and never followed up from a mining perspective 100 years ago, because the ventilation in that area was so poor and the guys had to haul their ore so far just to get it up to surface. So nothing really happened there. So that's number 2, and there's 2 holes drilled through there. And then number 3 is a further kilometer out to the east, the Ruby target. So this is an interesting one as well, because back in 1989, Echo Bay drilled some holes in that area, found a lot of smoke, a lot of hydrothermal alteration, top to bottom in a few of these holes. But also interestingly, hole ET7 hit 4 zones of silver and gold mineralization. That was never followed up. 500 meters down hole, mind you, but we're looking for something that could be very large here. So we're going to put a hole through there as well. ET7 is interesting because it's a vertical hole, so it's drilled straight down from surface. We also know that the veins around the Belmont Mine, where they're the best, they're steeply dipping or vertical. And not to get too technical, but if you can imagine trying to drill a steeply dipping vein or a vertical vein with a vertical hole, your chances of success are very, very low. So that was the original plan. Now things got really interesting for us in July, and I'm going to show you why. So this is the area we were just looking at in the underground figure that I'm circling right here. But what happened in July? So we have the eastern side of the Tonopah district. There's another company called Blackrock Gold that has the western side of the Tonopah district. And we both started drilling at around the same time. They were a couple months ahead of us, I think it's safe to say. But in any case, their first hole intersected 29 meters of 965 grams per ton silver equivalent, which is a very, very strong hole. That'll be one of the best holes of the year, I think, for sure. The upshot for us is that hole was drilled 300 meters from the property boundary. And I've just got it right over here on the left side of the map. So really what that gave us was the ammunition that we needed to say, okay, well, we really like the targets on our side of the property, which is we've called the Murray targets, and take one of the drill rigs that we have right now and put it on that side of the property. Now we know there's veins on their side, we know there's veins on our side, and we're pretty sure there's veins that cross the property boundary. You can go underground here. There's underground workings where you can definitely go across from one side to the other underground walking. So we've drilled that now with two holes. The third is in progress, and I think it's safe to say there'll be several more. Okay, so that's the Nevada property. Second property now is called Mogollon, and it's in New Mexico. Now, ever since we started this thing, we've been really looking for another project because, like I was saying, I think now is the time to be aggressive. So we found a project that was similar to Tonopah, to Hughes, in New Mexico. Now this one's located in southwestern New Mexico, and it's within 100 kilometers of 2 large open pit copper mines that are currently in operation and run by Freeport. So mining in this part of New Mexico is really a critical to their economy. Now the Mojon Project is interesting. Again, it's one of these historic districts that's never really seen the light of day. Mining went on here between the 1880s, but it stopped in 1942 because that's when the US went into World War II. And that's when all silver and gold mining stopped by law in the US. So that's the last time it was mined. In the 70s and 80s, though, there was a little bit of exploration and some drilling. And the drilling was actually done by a couple of geologists who had been very successful in Nevada. And one of them paid for it himself. He self-funded the drilling. And these guys ran into some really interesting grades. Like an MGR 38 around the Consolidated Mine intersected 14 meters at almost 600 grams per ton silver equivalent. And then the really, really high grades are also there with MGR 18 a little further to the south, intersecting 2.3 meters of almost 2,000 grams per ton silver equivalent. So the really interesting thing for me about this area is that, hey, where it's drilled, you get some good numbers right around some of the historic old mines. So there's some quote unquote low-hanging fruit. Where it's not drilled, well, it's not drilled. So I see a lot of good blue sky potential in a lot of this camp as well. Now just switching to an underground view, looking at a long section around one of the mines called the Consolidated Mine. So what we're looking at here is those blue dots are where the drill holes tested. The upper part of that fraction is the silver equivalent grade, and the lower part of those fractions are the drilled intersection lengths. So right around the old stopes of the Consolidated Mine, we've got some really strong drill holes, like hole 38, 598 grams per ton over 14 meters. Hole 40, 632 grams per ton over 4.3 meters. And the interesting thing about this is that, it's over quite a large distance. We've got a strike length here of at least 400 meters and a lot of very widely spaced holes. There's 200 meters between each of these holes. So for me, this really is the definition of, well, we know where we know where the mineralization is, and all we need to do is go in there and drill it off at a proper spacing. So that'll be the first target to Mogollon, which I expect to be drilling probably sometime in the first half of next year, later in the first half of next year. So that's the 15-minute summary of Summa Silver. We're really focusing on these well-known, famous high-grade past producers that haven't really seen much modern exploration or any modern exploration. So I think what really that shows is there's excellent potential for a big discovery. A lot of these places we have historic high-grade results that are ready to follow up. And for a geologist like me and the team, this is like our bread and butter. This is what we really love to do. So thanks very much. That's Summa Silver.
Thank you so much, Galen. That was an awesome presentation. So we've had some questions.
Sure.
They're a little bit all over the board, but let's start with some of the financial questions.
Sure.
Can you explain the warrant breakdown?
Yes, I can. So I'll just go back to that slide.
Perfect, thank you.
So the warrants there, we've got warrants at 25 cents and warrants at $1.75. The warrants at 25 cents are just broker warrants from the first 25-cent placement. So there's a very minimal amount of those. The rest of the warrants are at $1.75, and those were half warrants issued at the dollar placement.
Okay, and I'm sorry, did you mention the expiry date on that?
Yeah, they're 2 years.
2 years, okay.
Yeah.
And is there a force on those?
There is. On the $1.75 warrants, we have the option to call them in if the stock trades over $3, I think for 10 days.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
We can stay on the slide. Next question, how far will the $9 million cash carry you?
I think it'll carry us quite far. We're certainly not looking to finance anytime soon. Definitely, the rest of this year and possibly the rest of next year. But I think what'll change our story here is that if we have, if we start getting some good results, we might want to expand the scope of the program and add more rigs. If we've got 2 rigs for this program, but if we start having good results, it becomes easy to justify expanding the program. The last one I was on with one of these, we ran it up to 8 or 10 rigs. Because you just, you need, I think in these markets, you need to be aggressive and you need to move quickly.
Great. So let's talk about percentage of management. How much do they own? I know you mentioned 18% for Eric Sprott, but what about management?
Yeah, so management and close associates is really up around 40. Okay. I would say half of that is, management proper, or a little under half of that is management proper.
Perfect. And then when we're talking about the condition of the Belmont infrastructure, mining infrastructure, is it reusable?
Not right now. Everything is rehabilitated and sealed up. You might be able to get underground from an adjacent property. But for me, the main thing about doing something like that is safety. No one's been down there in decades and decades. I heard that somebody I talked to was actually underground there in the 70s and said it was still looking good. But that's something that we can think
that's still
about.
That's still 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I know we talked about underground, but what's the infrastructure on site right now?
Yeah, so on site, everything has been taken down and moved away. That even happened a very long time ago. So all we've got left on site, more or less, are the cement pads.
Okay. And are you looking for any joint ventures?
Not off the top of my head. But I keep hitting on the point that I'm trying, that we want to be as aggressive as possible. So we're always open to discussions and, looking at new properties that come across my desk, almost weekly. I think that it's very difficult to find silver projects, very difficult. And it's even harder to find quality silver projects. So, my focus is still being quite picky, even though, we might have shifted from bear market to bull market for the medium term to long term.
Well, and that actually brings me to my other question. How did you come to pass that you were able to buy these two properties?
Yeah. So the Nevada property, I've been interested in Nevada for years and years, and I was taking my time looking for projects for, a solid couple years, and looked at, probably between 100 and 200 things. This one was owned by 3 individuals, and they were looking at it as a tailings project, and we were introduced by mutual colleagues, me pretty much sleuthing around Nevada for quite some time. Now in the tailings, there's some interesting numbers in the tailings. There's potentially 1 to 2 million tons of tailings on surface, with grades of anywhere from 60 to 100 grams per ton silver equivalent, which is pretty good. And because they were self-funding this thing, basically personally, it's really, the lowest hanging fruit is those tailings. So they were looking at potential reprocessing options, and still are. But I just thought to myself, well, what's the underground potential like here? I looked at companies that had gone into these historic districts, like a Silvercrest or someone 5 years ago, and had some success. So that's what really piqued my interest. And I just don't think that, you'd see too much traction in the markets doing a generally small scale tailings projects, although it might be of interest individually. So, got to know them, built the relationship, really kind of wanted to refocus on the underground potential, and thankfully they agreed with me and decided to do a deal to put it into Summa.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
And we have a question here about the permitting and the property ownership. What's the breakdown there?
Yeah, okay, so the permitting, where we're doing the drilling, and especially around the old mines, those are patented mining claims. So as far as permitting goes for drilling, you don't need to do any. It's like private ground.
Okay.
So we were able to pretty much start drilling within a month of finishing our first financing. Permitting wise for, further down the road for potential mining would be a different story, but it's the state of Nevada. It would be a relatively small scale underground operation in comparison to the big open pits that operate in other parts of the state. So I don't anticipate, any major problems there if and when the time comes. And then the ownership of was that the next question, Sophie? The ownership?
Yes,
of the
exactly. Property ownership.
Yeah. So I got this property. It's a 5-year option for us to own 100% of it, for cash payments of $400,000 US, and share payments of $400,000 US in value. So it's $800,000 total consideration spread out evenly over 5 years for 100%. And then there's a $1.5 million work commitment, but I expect that'll be done this year.
Okay. So here's a great question. How big is the potential on the Tonopah property if all the stars align?
You know what? I think it's safe to say that we know that almost 200 million ounces of silver came out of here already. That was before any modern exploration was done. So the interesting thing about this property, or one of the interesting things, is that, okay, excuse me here, I took that slide out. So on this slide, what I'm showing here on the bottom right, this key map, mine strike length of the Tonopah district being 4 kilometers. Well, that's where the 175 million ounces of silver came out of. Well, we've got another 5.5 kilometers on the property where we know that at least there's some really good smoke that goes out there. We don't know where the veins are, if they're there, but I like to think big. So, if we've got 100 or 175 million ounces coming out of this 4 kilometers, and we've got another 5 kilometers of exploration potential, I think that speaks to the potential of what we could be looking for. Personally, and this is just me personally, I'm shooting for 100 million ounces plus, but that saying that is probably way too early for me to even say that at all right now, but that's my mindset.
Okay. Is there any geological evidence on the property that suggests the veins or the structures run along the whole 5 kilometers to the east?
Yeah, there's alteration. So first of all, it's the Halifax fault, this fault, that really cut off the old mining. So we know there's sniffs out there, and just on this this figure now. The Halifax Fault runs in somewhere through here. You know, we know we have veins out here on this side of it, just small scale mining in the Mizpah extension mine. We know we have veins out here in ET7 that carried silver. We know we have very strong alteration in ET10 and ET13 that didn't carry silver, but very, very, very strong alteration, which is a great sign. And then we know we have alteration at surface out here, clay chloride alteration at surface out here that I've seen and walked all over and thought to myself, what's going on? And then Echo Bay also drilled a hole called ET14 further out, which would be out somewhere in this part of the property, as if you can see my cursor.
Yeah.
That also was extensively altered. So it's like we've got the signs that the system continues. It's just we're just not sure if there's veins or where they're be located. So that's something we're working on.
Okay, we have another technical question for you. What's the grade thickness required, grade X thickness, that is considered mineable in the region?
You know what? That's a good question. That's a tough one to say. You know, I think we're shooting for, you know, something like, you know, I think you try to build a mine in these areas, especially if you look at what the gold silver ratio is now. If you're looking at 500 grams per ton silver equivalent over 5 to 10 meters, I think that gets you a start. I mean, you'd want to have some higher grade zones in the deposit that could help you there. But I think that's kind of a start of what you're looking for.
And so would you be considering mining it yourselves, or would you think of bringing in a major?
You know, that's a good question. You know, probably a little too early to even think about that. What we need to do first is start seeing what's left here, and that's the whole point of this drill program, is to give this area, this whole property, a good first pass to see what we could be dealing with, to start to hone in on you know, if we can get to that point, which, you know, I really hope we can.
And when do you expect, you know, I know it's always hard to predict these things, but when would you expect the mine drill results, the drilling results to come in?
Yeah, so we've been drilling since the beginning of July. You know, it's been almost 3 months now. So very, very soon, you know, numbers are finally starting to roll in now after the assay labs have been delayed. It's funny, just Nevada's really hot right now. Everyone started drilling at the same time, so it's been slow.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So numbers are starting to roll in now. We're putting them all together, and I expect to have results out very soon.
And on that, that you mentioned, have there been any COVID restrictions? Did COVID delay you guys in any way?
That, you know, yeah, again, that's not one I've actually had to think about or answer for a while. But right at the beginning is when we first started this thing. That's when the first wave of COVID was really happening. And I started before we started drilling, you know, I started looking to other companies in the area, and people were starting to drill. So it's not that it's delayed us. It's that it's added another level of precaution, you know, with the best practices around social distancing and cleanliness that the contractors down there take very seriously.
Oh, excellent. So I see Paul's joined us. Paul, do you have a question or two for Galen?
A couple of questions. First off, your stock is up 20 cents today already, so you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, hard to be humble sometimes.
But I see a spike in your stock in mid-July,
Yes.
up to around 340. It's above 340, and then coming off pretty hard. Was that over exuberance in the marketplace when silver and gold really started to fly up, or?
I think that had a lot to do with it. You know, I see three things that happened there. Markets were very strong there, number one. Number two, our stock is, you know, quite tight, so it's leveraged to things like that. And number three, there's a lot of excitement around us beginning to drill. I think it was a triple whammy of positivity. And then, of course, when things cool off, you know, when the market's cooled off, we're leveraged to the downside as well.
No, exactly. That's what I thought it was. I just wanted. Now, have you looked at anything at all about a CapEx or putting this into a mine?
No, not yet.
Right.
Not yet. I don't think we're quite ready to start doing that. The focus right now is just, what could be left.
And do you have any debt?
No debt.
No, perfect. And one last question. Did Howard Hughes actually mine it through Summa?
No, he didn't. He owned it for a few years right towards the end of his life. Hughes was an interesting guy. He was way ahead of his time on a lot of things. And I think mining being one of them, but unfortunately his health was in decline then, and he passed away before he could really realize any of his mining ideas.
All right, well, it pretty much covers, like, I mean, this is a great story, obviously. Silver mines are hard to find. You know, there's a lot of silver out there, but there's a lot of mines that are hard to find. So, Galen, thank you so much for your presentation today. Much appreciated. Thanks to all who attended today, and we'll keep everybody up to speed on what's happening with you, especially because you got drill results coming.
Yeah.
You probably should have a couple of months of drill results coming up, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, they'll start to come out in batches as we receive results over time.
All right, that's very good. We'll keep everybody posted. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Paul and Sophie. Thanks, everyone.